We interrupt our regularly scheduled programming to bring you this special A&E presentation featuring the original NBC News footage from the morning of July 16th, 1969. I'm Edwin Newman. At this moment, 20 years ago, a Saturn V rocket sat on Launch Pad 39A at Cape Kennedy, Florida. On top of the rocket, in a spacecraft called Apollo 11, in a command module called Columbia, were 3 American astronauts. At 9:32 a.m., the precise time dictated by the inflexible laws of celestial mechanics, Apollo 11 was scheduled to blast off on the most astonishing voyage ever undertaken. Its destination, the moon. This is the Apollo 11 liftoff, as it happened. The time is T-minus 10 minutes and counting.
This is Apollo Saturn Launch Control. We are go for Apollo 11. Firing command coming in now. We're on an automatic sequence as the master computer supervises hundreds of events occurring over these last few minutes. We are go with all elements of the mission at this time.
However, it appears to me that that last 15-second count comes very, very quickly, much sooner than I sort of expected it to come. All of a sudden, we were at 15 seconds and we were counting down, and at some 7 seconds, you start getting the ignition sequence. And at that time, was really all up to Tom, and it's really all up to Neil in this case, because he's the man who has the capability to abort from that point on. If everything isn't set and ready to go from that time on, you're probably too late.
So the 3 astronauts are now going through the procedures just described for us in their tiny spacecraft on top of this enormous rocket. They have about 160 cubic feet in there, which is about the size of the interior of a small automobile. But it is so carefully designed, they have packed into that small space a cockpit, an office, a laboratory, a radio station, a television station, a kitchen, a bedroom, a bathroom, and a living room. It is now, what is it, a little over 9 minutes to launch, and we'll be back in a moment.
During the 90 seconds that followed, the countdown, which began at 11 o'clock the night before, continued. But the real countdown to this momentous event began in 1961, when Yuri Gagarin's orbital flight dramatized as nothing else could the Soviet Union's superiority in space. President Kennedy responded with the declaration that Americans would walk on the moon before the decade was out. The voyage of Apollo 11 was the fulfillment of a promise and a dream. And though it was born as a byproduct of the Cold War, history remembers it not as a race won, but as mankind's boldest step. A&E is celebrating the 20th anniversary of Apollo 11 by presenting in 3 parts NBC's television coverage of the journey as it happened in July 1969. Until then, as a rule, only a few select individuals participated in the explorations that changed the course of human events. In the summer of '69, when Apollo 11 traveled to the moon, all of us were there. Neil Armstrong, Buzz Aldrin, and Michael Collins were on board the spacecraft, but in a very real sense, all of humanity was the Voyager, and the vessel we traveled on was television. NBC's commentator at the launch site was David Brinkley. The NBC News Space Center was manned by Chet Huntley and Frank McGee. Join us now for the liftoff of Apollo 11. The time is T-minus 7 minutes, 42 seconds, and counting.
Frank, we're about to see it begin. It's, what is that? 7 minutes, 7:55. Frank McGee, you there?
Yes. And it's getting mighty close. And though we take this in part rather matter-of-factly, I can remember, and I'm sure you can too, David, when we were kids, that one way of separating the nuts from the normal people was to ask a person, do you think a man will ever be on the moon? And if he said yes, you chalked him up as a nut.
Right.
And if he said no, you said, well, that fellow's all right.
Well, it's about to happen.
Well,
7
David,
minutes.
well, there it sits out there, the culmination of, well, somewhere between 25 and $33 billion, the skills and dedication of about 300,000 technicians, 11 3/4 years of time, the solemn but certainly risk-filled pledge of a president, some heartbreaking failures, and some stirring successes. This is a day of little kin to that October 4th, 1947, when the shrill and persistent beeps of Sputnik, as it wheeled about the autumn skies, shoved us, unprepared and awkward, into the space age. And this day certainly bears little resemblance to those bleak days of 1958 when Vanguards and Discoverers and Junos and Atlases were blowing up on our launch pads.
Jack King is about ready with an announcement, Chet. We're going to switch to him now.
Apollo set on launch control. We passed the 6-minute mark in our countdown for Apollo 11. Now 5 minutes, 52 seconds and counting. We're on time at the present time for our planned liftoff of 32 minutes past the hour. Spacecraft test conductor Skip Chauvin now has completed the status check of his personnel in the control room. All report they are go for the mission, and this has been reported to the test supervisor, Bill Schick. The test supervisor now going through some status checks. Launch operations manager Paul Donnelly reports go for launch. Launch director Rocco Petrone now gives a go for 5 minutes, 20 seconds and counting. Coming up shortly, that swing arm up at the spacecraft level will come back to its fully retracted position. This should occur at the 5-minute mark in the count. In the meantime, the lunar module telemetry has been powered down. We took a good look at Eagle, and it looks good. The spacecraft test conductor for the lunar module reported that Eagle was go. The swing arm now coming back to its fully retracted position as our countdown continues. T-minus 4 minutes, 50 seconds and counting. Skip Chauvin informing the astronauts that the swing arm now coming back. The astronauts will have a few more reports coming up in the countdown. The last business report will be from Neil Armstrong at the 45-second mark in the count when he gives a status on the final alignment of the stabilization and control system. We're now passing the 4-minute, 30-second mark in the countdown. Still go at this time. 4 minutes, 15 seconds. The test supervisor now has informed launch vehicle test conductor Norm Carlson you are go for launch. From this time down, Carlson handles the countdown as the launch vehicle begins to build up. We're now hitting the 4-minute mark. 4 minutes and counting. We are go for Apollo 11. We'll go on an automatic sequence starting at 3 minutes and 7 seconds. 3 minutes, 45 seconds and counting. And the final abort checks between several key members of the crew here in the control center and the astronauts. Launch operations manager Paul Donnelly wished the crew on the launch team's behalf good luck and Godspeed. 3 minutes, 25 seconds and counting. We're still go at this time. We'll be coming up in the automatic sequence about 10 or 15 seconds from this time. All still go at this time. Neil Armstrong reported back when he received the good wishes. Thank you very much. We know it will be a good flight. Firing command coming in now. We are on the automatic sequence. We're approaching the 3-minute mark in the count. T-minus 3 minutes and counting. T-minus 3. We are go with all elements of the mission at this time. We're on an automatic sequence as the master computer supervises hundreds of events occurring over these last few minutes. T-minus 2 minutes, 45 seconds and counting. The members of the launch team here in the control center monitoring a number of what we call red line values. These are tolerances we don't want to go above and below in temperatures and pressures. They're standing by to call out any deviations from our plans. 2 minutes, 30 seconds and counting. We're still go on Apollo 11 at this time. The vehicle starting to pressurize as far as the propellant tanks are concerned, and all is still go as we monitor our status for it. 2 minutes, 10 seconds and counting. The target for the Apollo 11 astronauts, the moon at liftoff, will be at a distance of 218,096 miles away. We've just passed the 2-minute mark in the countdown. T-minus 1 minute, 54 seconds, and counting. Our status board indicates that the oxidizer tanks in the second and third stages now have pressurized. We continue to build up pressure in all 3 stages here at the last minute to prepare it for liftoff. T-minus 1 minute, 35 seconds on the Apollo mission, the flight to land of the first men on the moon. All indications coming in to the control center at this time indicate we are go. 1 minute, 25 seconds and counting. Our status board indicates the third stage completely pressurized. 80-second mark has now been passed. We'll go on full internal power at the 50-second mark in the countdown. Guidance system goes on internal at 17 seconds, leading up to the ignition sequence at 8.9 seconds. We're approaching the 60-second mark on the Apollo 11 mission. T-minus 60 seconds and counting. We passed T-minus 60. 55 seconds and counting. Neil Armstrong just reported back it's been a real smooth countdown. We passed the 50-second mark. Power transfer is complete. We're on internal power with the launch vehicle at this time. 40 seconds away from the Apollo 11 liftoff. All the second stage tanks now pressurized. 35 seconds and counting. We are still go with Apollo 11. 30 seconds and counting. Astronauts report it feels good. T-minus 25 seconds. 20 seconds and counting. T-minus 15 seconds. Guidance is internal. 12, 11, 10, 9. Ignition sequence starts. 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. All engine running. Liftoff. We have a liftoff. 32 minutes past the hour. Liftoff on Apollo 11. Tower cleared.
Here we got a roll program.
Neil Armstrong reporting the roll and pitch program, which puts Apollo 11 on a proper heading. Plus 30 seconds.
Roll complete and pitches program. One Bravo
is a abort control mode. Altitude's 2 miles.
Houston, you're good at 1 minute.
Downrange 1 mile, altitude 4 miles now. Velocity 2,195 feet per second. We're through the region of maximum dynamic pressure now. Set 8 miles downrange.
Gave credit for his
velocity 4,000 feet per second.
Stand by for mode 1 Charlie. Mark, mode 1 Charlie. 1 Charlie.
Cliff Charlesworth taking a staging status.
This is Houston, you are go for staging. Inboard cutoff.
Inboard engines out.
I'm inboard cutoff.
Downrange 35 miles, 30 miles high. Standing by for the outboard engine cut down now.
There it is, right on the tick.
And ignition.
Houston, thrust is go. All engines, you're looking good.
Hi, Roger. You're loud and clear, Houston.
At 3 minutes, downrange 70 miles, 43 miles high, velocity 9,300 feet per second.
We got skirt zip.
Roger, we confirm, skirt zip.
Tower's gone.
Roger, tower.
Neil Armstrong confirming both the engine skirt separation and the launch escape tower separation.
Houston, be advised the visual is go today.
This is Houston, roger out.
Yeah, they finally gave me a window to look out.
Houston, your guidance is converged. You're looking good.
Downrange 140 miles, altitude 62 miles, velocity 10,300 feet per second.
11 Houston, you are go at 4 minutes.
Roger.
Apollo 11 right on the ground track. .190 miles downrange now, 72 miles high, velocity 11,000 feet per second.
Tracking it for quite a long period of time here with the Air Force cameras. About 80 miles in altitude now and more than 200 miles downrange, and still get a picture.
Booster says it's looking good at 5 minutes.
11 Houston, you are go at 5 minutes.
Roger, your Apollo 11's go.
Downrange 270 miles, altitude 82 miles, velocity 12,472 feet per second.
Fly to S4B to COI capability.
Okay.
Mark, S4B to COI capability.
Roger.
We're losing sight of the spacecraft, so we'll go to our animation of it and follow the sequence.
Using the S4B if necessary.
You're sitting in your living room.
Ah, thank you. You all are coming through beautifully, too.
It is the second stage of the Saturn that is still firing and will continue to fire for about another 4 minutes now.
Everyone's reporting go here in the control center.
So at 6 minutes, starting to give them orders.
Roger 11, your go from the ground at 6 minutes. Apollo 11, this is Houston, level sense arm at 8+17, outboard cutoff at 9+11.
When you see it in the early stages of the liftoff and realize that the
Level sense arm is the sequence that arranges the staging between the second stage and the third stage. The fuel uncovers a sensor starting that sequence.
and realize that the rocket is 363
Predicting
feet
that
high.
will be uncovered at 8 minutes 17 seconds with outboard engine cutoff 9 minutes 11 seconds on the second stage.
Apollo 11's go at 7 minutes.
11, this is Houston. Roger, your go from the ground at 7 minutes. Level sense arm at 8+17. Outboard cutoff at 9+11.
Roger.
Downrange 530 miles, altitude 95 miles, velocity 17,358 feet per second.
They're within about 5 miles of as high as they want to get on the launch. But I was trying to say that the flame shooting out of the rocket is 2, perhaps 3 times as long as the rocket itself, which is 360
Apollo 11
feet.
still
So you
right
can
down the
imagine
ground
how
track, still
long
go
the flame is.
at 7 minutes 41 seconds.
Roger, we confirmed.
Inboard engines are out on the second stage as planned. 11, go on all sources.
New York, go at 8 minutes.
I've just built the mixture ratio shift.
Roger, we got PU shift down here too.
United States Ford, these thunderstorms downrange is about all.
This is Houston. You are go for staging. Over.
Understand, go for staging.
Stand by for mode 4 capability.
Mode 4.
Mark, mode 4 capability.
Mode 4 and Apollo 11 could get into orbit using the service propulsion system now. Altitude is 100 miles, downrange 883 miles. Outboard engine cut off.
And ignition.
Again, right on time.
Ignition confirmed. Thrusters go, 11.
And now the
And we
third
have a
stage
good
is
third
propelling
stage
them.
now.
It stays with them for some time yet.
Velocity 23,128 feet per second. Downrange 1,000 miles, altitude 101 miles.
Apollo 11, this is Houston. At 10 minutes, you are go.
And Roger, 11, go.
Capcom Bruce McCandless giving the reports here from the control center.
Apollo 11, this is Houston. Predicted cutoff at 11 plus 42. Over.
1142, Rich.
It'll be 11 minutes and 42 seconds into the flight when the third stage comes
Downrange
out.
1,175 miles. Velocity 24,190 feet per second. Altitude 102 nautical miles. Apollo 11 still go on all sources.
Apollo 11, this is Houston. You are go at 11.
There you go.
We're predicting third stage shutdown at 11 minutes 42 seconds. Velocity 25,254 feet per second. Downrange 1,400 miles now. Altitude 102.8 nautical miles.
Shutdown.
Shutdown right on time.
1.4 by 103.6.
Roger, shut down, and we copy 101.4 by 103.6. Apollo 11, this is Houston. You are confirmed to go for orbit.
Well, they in fact are in orbit. And this is Mission Control in Houston.
This is Houston. The booster is safe.
All Roger.
Show velocity at insertion 25,568 feet per second.
You can see on our map at the NBC News Space Center about where they are located, the flashing lights out over the Atlantic Ocean. They are in orbit almost exactly what they had in mind. They wanted a circular orbit of about 101 nautical miles. The orbit is 101.4 by 103.6. And they got the speed they wanted, 25,568 feet per second, about 17,500 miles an hour. All of it routine so far, routine appearing, yet we all realize that this is the beginning of the most audacious undertaking that man has ever attempted. We'll be back in just a moment.
Liftoff. We have a liftoff. 32 minutes past the hour.
Moonwalk, As It Happened 1969, is brought to you in part by Citicorp, because Americans want to succeed, not just survive.
We help more Americans go to college, and we issue more MasterCard and Visa cards than any other company. We also serve millions of customers in every major marketplace worldwide. We're Citicorp and Citibank, America's largest financial services company. Whatever financial success you hope to achieve, whether it's business or personal, we can help you do it, and do it better than anyone else. Citicorp, because Americans want to succeed, not just survive.
What gives you lots of hot water, the lowest cost way?
Nothing does it like gas.
What lets you wash for less money to save every day?
Nothing does it like gas.
What heats water so efficiently it's half the cost of electricity?
Nothing does it, no, nothing does it like gas. For hot water, for cooking, home heating, or drying. Nothing does it, no, nothing does it like gas.
America's best energy value.
How well you carry yourself in business often depends on what you carry in business. Cambridge Business Wear from Mead. As important to the way you look as the clothes you wear. This year, the best-dressed people in business are all wearing the same thing. Cambridge Business Wear from Mead. As important to the way you look as the clothes you wear.
Patty Schoenfeld is deaf, but an IBM computer lets her talk on the phone. Art Sweet is almost blind, but can read a bank statement. And Madge Pentecost has trouble using her arms, but uses a computer by aiming an infrared beam. IBM provides information about special equipment like this, so more people with disabilities can use their abilities. Write IBM, Box C-1030, Atlanta, Georgia.
If you'd like to run a shop that's all your own, buy yourself a cozy home, steer away from crummy deals, protect your car from roof to wheels, then you'll want this free and helpful book listing 200 government pamphlets. Look, for this new edition, just drop a line. Write New Catalog, Pueblo, Colorado, 81009.
As It Happened, July 16th, 1969, now continues.
Flight is smooth, so far uneventful, perfectly on time, perfectly efficient. If you watched, or since you watched the liftoff with us, there's really nothing to say about it. What can you say about a sight like that? It's a sight that there's a huge crowd out here of reporters, visitors, VIPs, and others milling around and talking and gossiping and handshaking and telling jokes and making a lot of noise in a busy, vivid scene. And NASA has set up loudspeakers outside this area here, and so when the last minute or so of the countdown begins, they hear it over loudspeakers, 10, 9, 8, exactly as we all heard it. And it was notable that when it got down to about a minute, everybody who had been lollygagging, gossiping, talking, fell still and silent, knowing he was about to see something truly fantastic, but not really knowing what it was. We all know what we saw, but in another way, we don't know what we saw. You not only see it, hear it, feel it, inside and outside. And a minute or so after that unbelievable event, as you have heard over your television, the astronauts are talking to the ground and reporting on the facts and figures of the flight, and somebody here a minute ago was saying they are as matter of fact and unexcited and calm as if they were taxi cab drivers reporting in and saying we're on Maple Street headed for downtown. They're no more excited than that. But obviously they couldn't do their work any other way. Frank McGee, you there? I know you're there. I don't know why I asked. Frank?
Yes, David. And thinking, you know, that we were about 17 minutes and 45 seconds into the flight, which is longer already than the entire time that Alan Shepard spent in the first flight that this country made, which was not all that many years ago. We would like now to go back and let you see once again the liftoff that David was saying, and I think quite properly so, cannot be described, need not be described if you can see it. So we can, and so we're going to. This is a replay of the liftoff.
4, 3, 2, 1, 0. All engine running. Liftoff. We had a liftoff. 32 minutes past the hour. Liftoff on Apollo 11. Tower clear.
And that was the liftoff. It was all done, the last 3 or 4 minutes of it, completely automatically. Nobody had to push any buttons. Computers did the work, guiding the 3 men into the proper orbit. They with hands off, except for one switch that would cancel the mission, abort them if need be. It wasn't. There was, of course, on this launch a great deal of activity inside the spacecraft and chatter back and forth between the crew and the ground. In a pre-flight interview, the Apollo 10 astronauts, Thomas Stafford and Eugene Cernan, gave NBC News a rundown of the events just after the liftoff and their own personal recollections of all of it.
At the liftoff sequence, you heard Stoney called liftoff. He monitored this in the blockhouse, and when the TV saw the actual physical separation of the booster on the pad, that was when Stoney gave his go. With that, Neil and the crew would feel a slight increase in pressure on their backs, and at 12 seconds, the booster cleared the tower. Then at the same time, the roll program and the pitch program would start, well, within a second of that time, and that's what you heard them call out. That's when the booster starts to roll 2 azimuth, then it'll pitch down range as it goes out over the Atlantic. We've cleared the pad, and also the launch mission director gave the call tower clear when he visually saw the end of the booster clear the umbilical tower. And at that time, from on the ground, you noticed that the booster started its pitch over, and then you heard the Mission Control Center in Houston report a mode 1B. That occurred at 42 seconds. That means it's a different type of abort mode, and that you'll have. Then later on, you'll hear the call max Q. And max Q, the dynamic pressure around the spacecraft is increased to a certain point, and then it'll decrease beyond that. And up to then, it starts to scream and howl inside. However, it wasn't as loud as the Gemini because we had a boost protective cover over. We had a fairing out in front where the Gemini was just a blunt nose going through it. And also, the Gemini spacecraft cabin was smaller, and the spacecraft was not really as beefy as the Apollo.
About 50 seconds, or about 14,000 feet, our cabin now, which is pressurized to roughly sea level, 14.7 pounds, just a little bit greater than that, 14.7 pounds, primarily oxygen, now starts venting, and it finds a 5 psi, pounds per square inch differential between the cabin and the outside air. And when this occurs, there's no question that the cabin vent valve is opening because it comes out with a big whoosh. So I know that although we explained to Neil and Mike and Buzz from previous flights that there would be a big, horrendous noise when this happened, I'm sure that, that they were a little bit startled when they heard it on this past launch.
And the next event after that was when Neil reported inboard engine shutdown. This occurred at 2+15, and the G level was up to nearly 3.5, and it dropped down to 3 as you lost the thrust from that one engine. And then it continued to build up again into the staging event. Staging occurred approximately 2 minutes and 40 seconds. And again, what happens there, you have over you did have 7.5 million pounds of thrust to the first inboard shutdown. That reduced you to 6 million pounds of thrust, but your weight's decreased, so your total G level is up to nearly 4 Gs, and suddenly, within a quarter of a second, it goes to 0.
The most descriptive briefing or debriefing term we could give to Neil and Buzz and Mike to know what to expect from what you just saw right out here was that we call it the Great Train Wreck. And although as we saw a fireball from down here, when these two stages separated, the crew up there actually doesn't see much of a fireball at all. In Gemini, actually, when we staged, we had a fireball wrap around the spacecraft and we flew through it. In Apollo, because the vehicle is so long and we're so far ahead of the first stage, you feel it, as Tom just described, and as we call the Great Train Wreck, but you don't see that big fireball that you amazingly think you might after watching staging from the ground.
The next item that occurs, and you'll see this on the panel, it occurred when the light goes out, the S2 SEP light. That's when the big round ring that contains around the engines of the S2 gets jettisoned. And you'll hear this with a slight bang, and after that at 3:17, the tower and the boost protective cover is jettisoned. There's a slight pling, and you see it disappear right out into the black sky. It's gone. You never see it again.
The tower being gone at this time, of course, took the boost protective cover with it. And now you can see out all 5 windows. And what Mike, being in the right seat, and or Neil in the left seat could actually see, which I recall as being a little bit startling, it was no problem, but it's something I hadn't expected, was when that S2 is guiding, you have this active guidance as Tom was talking about, your trajectory is such that you go very high in altitude and then you pitch over and then you start accelerating the whole stack, the whole booster up to inertial velocity. Well, what Mike was actually seeing outside that window, because he didn't have a great deal to do during this boost period except monitor system. What he was seeing actually was the horizon through his window go up and down as the guidance was hunting for the right attitude. Now, this is a little bit startling because the whole world seems to go to the top of your window and then comes to the bottom of your window, and you're not sure whether you're going to do what we in aviation call a split S back down into the surface, or whether you're actually going to sort of level out and seek the right attitude. This is normal. This is what Mike saw. This is what we saw in Apollo 10. But it was one of those little things that no one had told us that was a little bit surprising.
The next thing that occurred to the major significance is when the S2 stage shut off. And that occurred at approximately 9 minutes and 11 seconds. And at that time, you get a minor pogo, but then it stops abruptly as the S2 stage is jettisoned. And it can no longer have a series of compression. Again, the load factors are a lot lower on the S2 stage. We're only up to around 2.5 to 3 Gs when that shuts off. And then the S4B is burning all the rest of the way into orbit. And then the final thing is when you obtain the orbital velocity, and that occurred approximately 11 minutes and 40 seconds.
I'm perhaps be forgiven for saying that I find that fascinating. We've talked with the astronauts on I don't know how many flights, but always prior to the flight, and asked them what they think it's going to be like, what they think it's going to look like and feel like. But this, to my knowledge, is the first time we have had them after the flight and have them tell us not what they expect, but what they experienced. And I think it adds something to it. We'll be back in just a moment.
3. 11 Houston, thrust is go. All engines, you're looking good.
Well, space is there, and the moon and the planets are there, and new hopes for knowledge and peace are there. And therefore, as we set sail, we ask God's blessing on the most hazardous and dangerous and greatest adventure on which man has ever embarked.
We sent them into the unknown, and they took with them not only America's hopes and dreams, but new, unheard-of technologies that have since touched us all.
The master computer supervises hundreds of events occurring. Astronauts report it feels good. 12, 11, 10, 9, ignition.
And the whole world watched, and the whole world shared our pride. From the earliest unmanned missions, IBM technology has played an important part in America's space program. We are honored to have shared in this remarkable journey.
If you suffer from any of these medical problems, a Contour chair with optional heat and massage may help. I'm Art Linkletter, and I'm concerned about these health problems. That's why I want to mail you this free Contour chair catalog. You see, Contour chairs are orthopedically designed to provide the kind of firm support you need to help reduce pressure on your legs, thighs, hips, and back. And to raise your legs above your heart, all you have to do is press this button. If you're concerned about your health, get free facts by mail about Contour. Find out about the marvelous relaxation that comes from the proper positioning of your body. Let me mail you this free Contour chair catalog, filled with details on the health benefits Contour chairs provide. Call me to get this important free information by mail now.
Call 1-800-634-4200. That's 1-800-634-4200. Toll free. Call 1-800-634-4200.
Liftoff, as it happened, now continues.
The Apollo 11 Saturn V combination, which took off from Cape Kennedy about 30 minutes ago, weighed 6,300,000 pounds at the time of firing. During its journey, it will burn more than 86,000 pounds of fuel. That was just in the 3 seconds or so between ignition and liftoff. And from that point on, Apollo 11 will continue to lose weight constantly upon its landing. And when it comes back, it'll weigh a little more than 31,000 pounds. Now let's go to Mark Landsman at Wapakoneta, Ohio.
Tremendous. We're most happy.
What is a parent's feelings at a moment like this?
It's just a feeling of Thanksgiving.
Have you been waiting anxiously for this moment?
Yes.
Yes, we're very happy that the first stage is completed in such a fine takeoff.
As you sat and watched the liftoff, did you think about the risks involved?
Not so much. I was prepared for that ahead of time.
How do you go about preparing yourself?
My inner faith helps me.
When did you last talk to your son?
Yesterday, about noon, we had a nice long talk with him on various subjects, mostly pertaining to the family. The rest of the family is, of course, at the Cape, and our near relatives and even distant relatives are down there to view the launch today.
Those were the parents of Neil Armstrong being interviewed by Mark Landsman in Wapakoneta, Ohio. As we see each one of these launches occur, it may also occur to many of us that as thrilling as these triumphs and successes are, they sometimes have a tendency to produce a backlash of discouragement over our inability to predict or control our weather, to manage our cities and regulate our traffic, to eliminate poverty and crime and educate all our population, house and feed all of our people. At the same time that there is euphoria and triumph, there may also be a backlash of some disappointment, because it may occur to us frequently that if we can correlate 22,000 flight steps and 9 million pieces of hardware and make them function as perfectly as all of this, why are we failing with some of our other problems? Therefore, Apollo 11 increasingly perhaps has become the symbol of a dawning suspicion that political, social, and spiritual excellence may not automatically follow technical achievement, that the two are separate. Many realize that our junkyards, the industrial slums and slag piles, the oceans of beer cans, and the urban sprawl are fruits in one way of technological advance. But then on second thought, it may occur to us also that technology can ultimately be applied to yet clean up the mess, which are the disappointing byproducts of this same technology. So Apollo 11 causes us to think. Most of the 200 million of us are thinking, who are we? Where are we? Is the universe our complete oyster? What about our priorities? Did the Russians, by any chance, in 1957 with Sputnik lead us into a series of bad judgments? Is it good that we kind of cloak Apollo 11 with theological and metaphysical wrappings and second thoughts? For it might yet dawn upon us that a restrained, self-disciplined, and precise life journey here on Earth could produce some comparable results. Well, Frank, I was about to pose a question to you. That we knew that this was going to occur with Apollo 11. Any free people, I should think, with the freedom to ask difficult questions and a habit of exercising that privilege, would ask, after an investment of $25 billion or so, what is going to be the fruit of all of this? What's it going to yield? What's going to be the return? Indeed, Apollo 11 does come at a time when it's increasingly difficult to sell the concept that we go to the moon just because it's there, or that we think we can do it, or that we go just for the sheer excitement and exhilaration of it. Solution of problems and a list of social political triumphs, it occurs to us, would also yield a great sense of national exhilaration at this point. So as Apollo 11 takes off and the moon journey begins, and as it concludes, I suppose most of us Americans are going to be wondering about our list of priorities. And it was interesting to note that the Reverend Ralph Abernathy of the Southern Christian Leadership Conference led a group of 15 persons, most of them children, to Cape Kennedy, to say that the United States should match its efforts in space with a program to feed the hungry on Earth. Abernathy said that America has reached out to the stars, but has not reached out to her starving poor. Well, Dr. Thomas Paine, administrator of the space agency, then met with Abernathy yesterday and told him the Apollo would not be sent to the moon if that would solve the problem of hunger in the world. He said the national unity and purpose which makes the moon flight possible also and ultimately can be brought to bear on poverty. Frank?
This question that you posed, Chet, about what does it gain us has been posed to everyone in the program, I suppose, from the top officials to the astronauts themselves, and it's hardly fair, really, to ask them because their minds don't run in those channels. But it is a good and sensible question to ask. And they have great difficulty in answering because they can't point to anything really tangible. They can't say, look, that thing standing there, whatever it might be, is a result of this program. And the best answer that I've been able to piece together from them, and I don't necessarily accept it as being adequate, but at any rate, it's the best answer that I can recall them having put together, is that out of it will come a technology that the government has succeeded in harnessing the resources of the government, of the scientific community, of the universities, and of industry, and managing this successfully to tackle extremely difficult problems and do extremely unlikely things. This is an accomplishment which cannot be denied, And out of it, good things could happen. We, after all, do have the technology to clean up the water. We have both what they call the software and the hardware to do it. We have the technology, which is to say we know how to clean up the air. We have the software and the hardware to do it. And heavens knows, we know how to feed people, and we know how to build houses. What is lacking at this point is a determination to use the technology at hand to solve those problems, the will to do it. About the only thing that we don't know how to do is change people's minds and make them like each other. That's not a matter for technology. But the rest of it is at hand if the decision is made to do it. David?
They're in orbit, and everything is fine. On the score, on the subject you were talking about, it seems to me that the flight we have seen begin today was a combining of technology and romance in a way they never have been combined before, which is to say that the engineers now are doing what poets and romantics have imagined. And perhaps there will always be a gap between what man imagines and what he is able to do, because it is easier to think about doing something than it is to do it. But so long as the gap between imagination and reality is not too big, we may even preserve some degree of sanity. The alternative is for man to feel bound and limited and held down when what he actually wants to do is move, explore, expand, grow, achieve, and fly. And so with some really splendid engineering we have seen here today, an impressive tribute, by the way, to the talent turned out by American technical schools, one generation of Americans is doing what an earlier generation dreamed about. Floyd Kalber is NBC News correspondent, is on, what is it, the Merritt Island Causeway? What do they call that? Bennett Causeway, which is a place where a lot of visitors have, with campers and trucks and cars and station wagons and so on, have been camped and parked all night waiting to see what we saw a few minutes ago. Floyd?
The boats are moving down the Banana River now, large and small. They moved up there last night, yesterday, and this morning. Several thousand of them have so far come down. They moved up very close to within just a few miles of the Cape Kennedy launch site for Apollo 11. They're now passing underneath the Bennett Causeway. On the causeway, traffic has thinned out considerably. At one time, immediately after the launch, there was just a gigantic crush. Almost as soon as the flame went out on the rocket and the rocket went out of sight, the cars started up here, this packed area in which all of the campers and the cars had been parked, started to move onto the causeway, where they immediately came to a stop. Sir, could I talk to you for a moment?
Yes, sir.
Who are you, sir?
I am Leoncio Flores from Connecticut. We're
from where in Connecticut?
Greenwich, Connecticut.
Is this the first space shot you've seen?
That's right. We came all the way down from Connecticut to watch it. 1,200 miles.
Is this a special trip down to see the launch?
Nothing but the space shot, right.
Yeah, are you going to take a vacation, go on somewhere from here?
Well, we plan to spend about a week over in North Carolina, but this was our main reason.
The main reason was the launch?
The space shot, right.
What was your impression of it?
Well, it's fabulous, the thundering as the space shot takes off, and this emotional moment that you don't know whether it's taking off or staying on. I think this is the crucial moment.
Did you have some concern?
Yes, I was.
Can you compare it with anything that you've ever seen or heard of in your lifetime?
Oh, God, like when I was getting married or something like that.
I'm not going to ask your wife for a rebuttal on that. Thank you very much, sir, for talking to us. We appreciate it.
It is a pleasure.
Appreciate your taking the time.
Thank you.
So now the tourists move off from the causeway, the Bennett Causeway, and go on to continue their vacation, adding a very historic moment to what would otherwise be an exciting vacation anyway. And they go on now to their alligator farms and their underwater swimming programs in the sandy beaches of Florida. Floyd Calber, NBC News, reporting from the Bennett Causeway.
So he said it felt like the day he got married. The Apollo 11 is now out over the Indian Ocean, approaching the western shore of Australia. And as you perhaps know, the crew will make 1.5 revolutions of the Earth, and when it comes back over Australia on the next time around, that will be the moment for the decision whether or not to go for the moon. That will be a couple of hours from now. We'll be back in just a moment after this message.
3, liftoff. We have a liftoff. 32 minutes past the hour.
What gives you lots of hot water, the lowest cost way?
Nothing does it like gas.
What lets you wash for less money to save every day?
Nothing does it like gas.
What heats water so efficiently it's half the cost of electricity?
Nothing does it, no, nothing does it like gas. For hot water, for cooking, home heating, or drying. Nothing does it, no, nothing does it like gas.
America's best energy value.
During the 30s and 40s, America was thinking big. Big cars, big cigars, and movie stars. And from the great glittering ballrooms, the big sound of those wonderful big bands. Now, Quality Records presents the definitive Big Band Collection, a superb selection of 36 big band favorites on 3 magnificent albums. Sit back and enjoy the best of a beautiful era. The definitive Big Band Collection is only available in this special TV offer and features one of the world's greatest drummers, Buddy Rich. The definitive Big Band Collection, a lifetime of memories on 3 LPs, 3 cassettes, or 2 compact discs. Order now.
Have your credit card ready and call 1-800-228-2787 or send $19.95 for 3 LPs or 2 cassettes, $24.95 for 2 CDs, plus $4 shipping to Big Band Collection, P.O. Box 98363, Atlanta, Georgia. This Big Band Collection is the best of a beautiful era and a lifetime of memories of the 30s and 40s. Call now for your Big Band Collection of the greatest big bands of all times. Call 1-800-228-2787, 1-800-228-2787.
This year, the best-dressed people in business are all wearing the same thing. Cambridge business wear from Meade, as important to the way you look as the clothes you wear. When you're choosing your business wardrobe, selecting everything down to the last detail, don't forget the last detail. Cambridge business wear from Meade, as important to the way you look as the clothes you wear.
As it happened, July 16th, 1969 now continues.
It's interesting to realize that almost at the very time that Apollo 11 was being prepared and fueled up earlier this week, the 1970 fiscal year budget for NASA was getting its final treatment in the Congress. The Congress, under mandate and political pressure to cut down on federal expenditures, was voting NASA just over $3.9 billion for its next year of operation. The lion's share of this money is allocated for the Apollo moon landings, which are expected to continue through 1970, or next year. This program will get $1.691 billion compared with $251 million for work on the so-called Apollo Applications Program. This program is the next big project for the space agency, that is the placing of space stations in Earth orbit so that scientists can work and experiment in space for longer periods of time. The budget allows for a NASA staff of 31,500 people and for 100,000 other indirect employees. Correspondent Roy Neal is standing by at the Space Center in Houston. Roy?
The Lunar Receiving Laboratory here at the Manned Spacecraft Center is the place to which the astronauts will be brought after their flight. Along with them, their samples and their pictures of the moon. Manager of the laboratory, Dr. P.R. Bell, is here with me now. And Dr. Bell, it occurs to me that this must be a truly exciting moment for you and your people. Your laboratory is about to come to life.
Yes, sir. It is indeed. The launch is going off very well, and
Our preparations are proceeding properly. We're all in good state.
Those preparations that you mentioned, at this time, what are your people doing?
Well, they've been for months now preparing the operations. The people with the plants, for example, have been doing that for a month and a half or so, getting the plants grown that have to be used in these tests. So we're just proceeding up bit by bit, step by step towards the actual operation, which don't start till the 25th.
Right, once the astronauts have returned. But what about those people who will be quarantined with them? What's their status this morning?
Well, now, that is a little different because this morning these people are going into the CRA and they're essentially in closed quarantine from this morning onward.
Why would you lock them up so early, sir?
Well, that's to make sure that if any of them are going to come down with the flu or a head cold or something, we find this out well in advance and they'd get no further exposure to other people than themselves until that time. We don't want a stray cold coming down to make a mess of our problem.
Do they have television in that crew receiving area, Dr. Bell? Are they following the flight in other words?
Of course, yes, indeed they do. They've got television and radio, and they've got their own telephones in case they want to talk to somebody, so there's no problem there.
I see. Now, the lab status itself, sir, can you give us just in broad general terms the intent, the purpose of this place?
Well, this, of course, is basically a quarantine facility with very special and important scientific attachments for preliminary examination of the sample. It has facilities really for the sort of protection and preservation of the sample as the major parts over and above the quarantine tests. So we'll get the samples in, keep them from harm, test them for finding out whether there's any pathogens of any sort in them, and then begin the preliminary experiments that must be done because the time is wasting, and hold them there until the end of the quarantine interval when we're sure the pathogens are absent, and then send the material out to principal investigators everywhere, along with what we found out at that time.
Now, the question's often been raised, Dr. Bell. Are you really worried on behalf of your people that the astronauts might bring back some strange spore or germ from the moon?
Oh, most certainly not. Many scientific people have offered to eat the stuff if that would help the situation any, because the probability is quite negligible. But we can't take even a negligible chance, and so we go ahead and make all the careful preparations and the careful tests as though there were harmful things there. But it's far more risky to cross the street here than it is to work in the Lunar Receiving Laboratory, I assure you.
Thank you, sir. We've been talking with Dr. P.R. Bell, whose people at the Lunar Receiving Laboratory are waiting now a long wait for the astronauts to go to the moon and come back, after which the big job will begin at this point on the Manned Spacecraft Center. Frank?
We usually trace the origins of the space program back to Russia's launching of the Sputnik in 1958, and that's true, but it's not the entire truth. It actually goes back sometime earlier to a thing called IGY. It stood for International Geophysical Year, and confusion began there because that year ran 18 months long. But as just one of the many things that the United States planned to do during that time, and I remember Dr. Joseph Kaplan was chairman of the American Committee for this IGY, and I remember talking to him about it. But just one of the things that we planned to do was to put a satellite into Earth orbit. It had no particular function, really, except to demonstrate that it could be done and to send some signals back. It was a very tiny little instrument package and wouldn't do much, but we didn't get it up. Russia, which had not announced such a project as part of the Soviet Union's participation in IGY, beat us to the punch with Sputnik. So it really did begin with Sputnik, but in a larger sense, it began earlier with the International Geophysical Year. They're now 50 minutes into the flight and about to go over Australia for the first time. Next time around there, they'll decide whether to take off for the moon. And we'll be back.
3. 11 Houston, thrusters go. All engines, you're looking good.
Tonight on A&E.
At 8, biography profiles Charles Lindbergh. At 9, more classic vet stories on all creatures great and small. Then at 10, A&E Diamond Showcase presents Phoebe Snow. At 11, it's the outrageous Buffalo Bill. Then at 11:30, there's more Dabney Coleman on the Slap Maxwell story. Tonight.
You can see the dream of success in the eyes of people all across America. At Citicorp, we understand the dream. That's why, as Citicorp and Citibank, we've become America's largest financial services organization, already helping 1 in every 5 American families, with more home mortgages, more student loans, more MasterCard and Visa cards than any other company. We'd like you to get to know us better. Citicorp, because Americans want to succeed, not just survive.
Can Americans build a car as well as the Japanese? Chronicle finds out when we visit Honda of America here on A&E.
Tomorrow.
You already know where to look for the finest in comedy, drama, documentaries, and the performing arts. Now take a look at the all-new A&E Program Guide. It's full-size and in full color, and chock full of new and expanded features that will guide you through the exciting variety of entertainment you've come to expect from A&E. Each new guide offers monthly program highlights, program and celebrity close-ups, insightful feature articles, colorful prime-time schedules, descriptive daily listings, and a preview of what's coming next month. The A&E Program Guide is available monthly at the rate of $18 per year. To begin your subscription, send a check or money order to A&E Program Guide, P.O. Box 2094, Mahopac, New York, 10541. Or simply use your Visa or MasterCard and call 1-800-228-2787 toll-free. Get the source, the A&E Program Guide, and keep abreast of the finest programs television has to offer.
Liftoff, as it happened, now continues.
The crew of Apollo 11 is unique. 2 of the 3 members will become, by all present appearances, the first human beings to set foot on another heavenly body. Additionally, they are unusual. Only 6 men before them have been in the vicinity of the moon. And they also have another minor distinction. They perhaps have been asked more questions than almost anybody in the world, politicians included. For weeks before a flight, they are subjected to an endless stream of questions by people like myself. And it's not an easy chore for them to perform. They're not naturally talkative men, most of them. And the things they do talk about are difficult for the rest of us to understand. But they bear it with great good grace and do as good a job as they can. None of the men involved in this flight is regarded as an extrovert. Collins does have and frequently shows a good and keen sense of humor. I was talking with him before the flight in Houston, Texas, and I asked him if he, Collins, could describe the other 2 members of the crew for me. Let's suppose now that you were talking to somebody who had never seen Armstrong or Aldrin, didn't know a thing in the world about them, and you wanted to describe them, not physically, but just the kind of guys they are. How would you go about first, say, Armstrong? How would you describe him to such a person?
Well, I would first describe Neil as extremely intelligent. I mean, he has, I think, what is almost a towering intellect. It's not immediately apparent when you talk to Neil, but you probe deeply. Hard thing to do with Neil. He likes his own, he has his own barriers erected, but if you probe through those barriers, you'll find Neil is, as I say, that's my first impression and most lasting impression, extremely intelligent man, and not just in the very narrow field of space technology, but to cover a wide range of subjects. He's, I think, an outstanding individual. And Buzz, quite the same. I think the 2 of them, if they have one characteristic in common, I would say intelligence. They're both extremely intelligent people, and it's tough to keep up with them.
They both have a certain amount of reserve, too, which is not bad.
Yes, I believe that's true. They both, unfortunately, tend to be non-communicators, but it's there.
They tell me, I don't know Armstrong that well, but they tell me he has a pretty sly wit on occasion.
He has. Neil has, I think, a wonderful dry wit.
Yeah. Can you recall any little things he's come up with, or is that putting you on the spot?
I don't, no, it doesn't really, but I don't right this second recall any, but you have to be listening closely for him, or you miss him. He has a wonderful dry wit.
Michael Collins, who has a wit himself. The Mission Control reported the heartbeats of the astronauts on their liftoff this morning and compared them to the rate of heartbeat that they had in their earlier flights. For Armstrong, his heartbeat this morning was 110. Now, that compares to a beat of 146 when he flew in the Gemini program. And Collins had a heartbeat of 99 today compared to 125 on his previous flight. And Aldrin's heartbeat this morning, as he took off from Cape Kennedy, was only 88 compared to 110 when he flew in the Gemini mission. So all three men had a lower heartbeat rate this morning than they had on their previous flights, which seems to suggest that there is some advantage to experience. Russia, by the way, had made no mention of today's flight in broadcast and the publications up until yesterday, or through yesterday, very little mention. And it appeared that they were pretty well going to ignore today's flight. But they did broadcast the liftoff at about the time, gave the names of the crew, and this seemed to indicate to some Soviet watchers that they might offer fairly comprehensive coverage of this flight. They did not, however, interrupt their television programming to carry any live pictures of the liftoff from Cape Kennedy. Nor has Moscow had any more to say about the Soviet Union's Lunar 15, which is now on its way to the moon, and with success should land there before the Apollo 11 crew does. The vacuum that left by lack of information from Russia about the purpose of Lunar 15 is being filled by speculation, of course, inevitably. And the main current of speculation is that this is an attempt to send a device up and have it make a landing on the moon, scoop up a sample of the lunar soil, and return it to Earth. All without benefit of humans being there. But as we say, that is only speculation. Russia hasn't said what its purpose is and is not likely to until after it's accomplished. It is an advancement of sorts, I suppose you could say, for the Soviet Union to even announce that they have anything underway until it's accomplished, because in the early days of their programs, they never said anything until the whole thing was over. They could not, of course, keep it secret from the world because the skies are being watched by radar all the time, and the rest of the world knew when they launched or attempted a launching. But it was only after the fact and after a success that Russia would even acknowledge that the undertaking had been attempted. Peter Hackus, what have you there?
Frank, we understand that within the next 20 minutes or so, we are going to get our first transmission from Apollo 11. Now, this will be by use of the camera that we've seen before. This is the color camera, which is inside the command module, this 13-pound camera. Incidentally, it's this camera that the astronauts on Apollo 10, as you recall, sent back those wonderful pictures. And for that reason, they were awarded the honorable Emmys. And so as experts in the field, why, you can expect some other good pictures. This will be the first time. One of the other features that goes with this camera is this very tiny monitor. The screen is approximately the size of, oh, perhaps a credit card, something like that. A cigarette package is smaller than a cigarette package. And what this does is to tell the men in the spacecraft what they're looking at. Now, in the past, there has been some problem of focusing the camera. And what's being done now is that through the use of this tiny camera, the astronauts, that is to say this tiny mini monitor, they're calling it, they can tell more or less where they're focusing the camera. They can't tell exactly, but they can certainly tell the general direction. So by the use of both the camera and this tiny monitor, which they'll be looking at in this fashion, you notice the Velcro on the bottom of the monitor, and this goes either on top or on the side of the camera. They can tell pretty much the pictures they're taking. Now, the lenses, everything is simplicity. As I said, it's very lightweight, 13 pounds, and very simple to operate. They are variable focus lenses. They are, there are about 3 different stops that they have. There's a zoom lens attachment, and from what we saw last time, we should this time get equally good pictures. Now, there's another television camera on Apollo 11. It is not aboard the command module is in the lunar module, the LEM, and that is a black and white camera. We've also used that and seen that used in the past. And so this camera will stay aboard the command module. And in fact, we'll be getting pictures between here and the moon, and then we'll be getting pictures all the way back from the moon. The other camera is stowed at this particular moment aboard the LEM, and the LEM, as you know, is folded, and we haven't seen it brought out yet. That camera will be unveiled, so to speak, after the LEM strikes the lunar surface, lands on the moon. And from that moment on, we'll be witness, hopefully, to all of the activities that Armstrong and Aldrin do. In fact, we'll be seeing the first man stepping onto the moon as he actually does it. And then they will remove that camera from its bracket and put it about 30 feet away from the lunar module. And that camera then will continue to play for all of the time that they're on the lunar surface. So we'll see all of that activity. That comes, of course, only after they reach the moon. In the meantime, as I said, within another 15 or 20 minutes, we hope to get the first brief television transmission from Apollo 11. Now, David Brinkley. Thank you, Peter. Be sure to give that camera back to him. We are told that in several countries around the world, Monday, next Monday, is going to be a holiday in the schools and otherwise, because on television, every country on Earth that has television, with the possible exception of Russia and maybe a handful of others, will watch the landing on the moon live at the same time we are. In this country, it'll be in the middle of the night. In various other countries, it will, of course, be at various times, depending on where they are. But in any case, a number have announced that Monday will be a holiday, either because people will want to stay home and see it during the day, or because they will have been up half the night or all night looking at it. There has been no such happy announcement forthcoming in this country. A few minutes ago, Vice President Agnew, who was here among the VIP guests, went into the firing room here next door, where the where the launch is controlled, walked around, admired what they were doing, and then using a PA system made a little speech to those in the room. Here's how it was on videotape.
Team of specialists, scientists, engineers, and other experts that have been assembled in this program disseminated because someone was too short-sighted to provide enough of the material support to continue with these programs. Now, the president has awesome responsibilities, as you know. At a time when inflation's running away in this country, he's got a problem with trying to decide the priorities, the human priorities that are necessary to allocate what wealth we have, at the same time bringing this inflation under control. I would shudder to have those responsibilities right at this moment that he has. Unfortunately, things are not made easier for him because many people don't seem to be able to evaluate properly exactly how the thrust of the spending should be apportioned. And maybe nobody can do that. Maybe that's a job for a superhuman being. But I feel this, that as the president of the Space Council, and having had such an intimate contact with NASA and with the other agencies that collaborate so wonderfully to bring about these results, that this is America, that this is the future of our country, and that the gains that come from this program are going to be the greatest, going to constitute the greatest fallout for the advancement of all our citizens that anything we could do could bring about. So all I can say to you is we'll be there pitching for you, and you stick with us, we'll stick with you, and together we'll do this job. Thank you very much.
That was Vice President Agnew, of course, here next door in the firing room, talking to the NASA people who were in charge of the launch. And you heard what he said. This is March 16th, 1969. And the other night I was talking with some NASA people who pointed out that 40 years after Lindbergh flew the Atlantic alone for the first time, 20,000 people every day fly the Atlantic. from babies to grandmothers. And what will grow out of this in 40 years, obviously we don't know.
And so the image of the Apollo 11 liftoff was burned into the memory of the world. It remains one of the most striking images of achievement in human history. Words cannot capture the feelings felt around the planet when the first flicker of orange appeared and the spacecraft began its slow, slow rise. All the rocket's raw energy, a thrust more powerful than 92,000 locomotives, seemed momentarily suspended in some teletronic time warp as the Earth held its breath. Then a great gust of smoke and steam propelled us all toward the moon. Wernher von Braun called the morning of July 16, 1969, the dawn of the day man left his planetary cradle. What we attained when Neil Armstrong planted his boot in the lunar dust 4 days later was a completely new step in the evolution of man. Join us 4 days from now on the evening of July 20th, when we will relive mankind's greatest leap, the moonwalk, as it happened. I'm Edwin Newman for the A&E Cable Network.
Ignition sequence start. 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. All engine running. Liftoff. We have a liftoff. 32 minutes past the hour. Liftoff on Apollo 11. Tower cleared.
Now we got a roll program.
Neil Armstrong reporting their roll and pitch program, which puts Apollo 11 on a proper heading. Plus 30 seconds.
Roll complete and engine program.
Altitude's 2 miles.